Good day, my name is Firra. I'm an MBA student of ITB. It's the university in Bandung, Indonesia. Today, I'm going to try to present you demand estimation. It's one of chapters in Salvatore's book, Global Economy. The chapter is trying to handle the supply-demand problem. Company generally wants to know the equilibrium point of quantity where supply is equal to demand. How? To find out the equilibrium point, company can try by doing research approaches as we can see. Customer survey means asking customer to fill in questionnaire responding to changes in price of commodity, income, price of related commodity, advertising expenditure, and so on. Observational research means finding out by looking the obvious customer's behavior simply by watching them buying commodity. Consumer clinic can be more like simulation where people are given money to be spent in simulated store. However, the result can be doubted since people know that they are being observed. Market experiments, unlike consumer clinics, are conducted in a real marketplace. Virtual shopping, the simulation of shopping mall environment, just like consumer clinics, only it is on the internet. The last, virtual management, similar like virtual shopping, but it's more from the manager's perspective. In order to find aspect affecting variables, we can use regression analysis. It's a statistical technique for estimating the relationship among variables. For example, the graph is showing the relationship between advertising expenditure to sales revenue. Advertising is the independent variable, and sales revenue is the dependent variable, because sales revenue is affected by the ad expenditure. The higher the expenditure, the higher the sales revenue. By using regression line, we can find the best linear formulation of the relationship. Also, in regression, there is E, which implying the error of the formula. In statistics, ordinary least squares or OLS is the method for estimating the unknown parameters in linear regression model. This is another example of regression analysis. The graph tells us about the actual revenue related to ad expenditure. The symbol E shows the error of the actual revenue compared to the predicted one. We can get E value by calculating actual data minus estimated data. Error of this type arise because of numerous explanatory with only a slight or irregular effect on Y are not included in the equation. Or there are random human behavior leading to different results. OLS minimizes the sum of square vertical distances between the observed responses in the dataset and responses predicted by the linear approximation. The resulting estimator can be expressed by a simple formula. A hat and B hat are parameters, E considered as error. Y hat is the estimated value, meanwhile T represents the period of time. From the slide, we can see how to find Y hat, and E. It will be explained further later. The formulation is when we have a series of data and we want to find the value of error. It's basically the same with the previous slide, only in this slide we need to summarize all subtraction of Y and Y hat. This is the process to find OLS. First, we can find B hat, and by using the B hat, we can find A hat. X bar and Y bar, in this case, means the average value of X and Y. This is the example. We have to find X minus X bar and Y minus Y bar for each period. Using the previous formula, we can find the B hat value, which is 3.53. Then, we can calculate A hat. Y bar minus B hat multiplied by X bar, 7.6. Test of significance is required to minimize the predicted value with the actual value. Here is the formula. We will use this set of data to show the calculation. The E value is 65.4830. The standard deviation is 30. Therefore, we can find the error 0.52. actual one. The t-statistic in the regression coefficient divided by its standard error. The standard error is essentially one estimated standard deviation of the dataset for the relevant variable. Degrees of freedom. In statistics, the number of values in study that are free to vary. For example, if you have to take 10 different courses to graduate and only 10 different courses are over, then you have 9 degrees of freedom. 9th semester, you will be able to choose which class to take. The 10th semester, there are only one class left to take. There is no choice if you want to graduate. Critical value is the value of test variable in the point between acceptance and rejection. Now, total variation will be used later to calculate R squared. Here is the formula. By calculating through this formula, we can get total variation of the explained and unexplained. From the graph, it can be seen that the actual value is quite different from the predicted value. The difference is important to be calculated to generate the accurate result and to see that we have chosen the independent variables for the dependent variables. Consider advertising as the independent and revenue as independent. This is the coefficient of determination, or R squared. This formula tells us how much the independent variable determines the dependent variable. From the sample, it can be stated that the independent variable determines 85% of the dependent variables. Therefore, we can say that the formulation is good enough. Coefficient of correlation, or R, is the square root of the coefficient determination. From the sample, it can be stated that the independent variable is 92% correlated positively to the dependent variable. Correlated means the degree to which the variables' movement are associated either to the same direction if the value is positive, or opposite direction if the value is negative. Next is multiple regression. Different with the ordinary regression, which only analyzes the impact of one independent factor to the dependent factor, multiple regression analyzes impact of more than one independent factor to one dependent factor. The R bar squared is basically similar to the concept from the ordinary regression. It just requires different calculation and considered as better because we want to consider that the number of degrees of freedom declines as additional independent variables are included in the regression. For example, if the result of R squared 91% means instead of 92% like the previous R value, the variable only determines 91%. It is still higher than the single regression result. F statistic calculation has the same purpose with T statistic, which is to find how significant can variation of the independent variables explain the variation of the dependent variable. If we calculate using the software, we can choose how high the degree of accuracy. For example, if we put 95 into the software, then the variables with F value higher than 0.05 will be rejected since it means they don't explain well the dependent variable. 0.05 comes from 1 minus 0.95. These are the problems usually occur in analyzing data using regression. This problem can cause the invalid result of the analysis. To prevent the problems, one of the things can be done is using data with long period of time. The determination of the data number itself can be calculated based on the population of the variables. Durbin-Watson. Durbin-Watson is the way to find out if there is autocorrelation or no. It can be read if D is equal to 2, then there's no autocorrelation there. These are steps to estimate demand besides through consumer survey like mentioned before. First, we have to identify the variables which can affect the dependent variables. Which model we want to use, either ordinary least square or multiple regression, for example. Collecting data, specify the form, estimate the function, and last test the validity and reliability of the result. The functional form can be chosen linear or power function. This is the estimation format. That's all, folks. I hope it can be helpful for you. Thanks for watching. Bye.